really shone.
He was by far the most charismatic mathematician of his age. It's clear that everybody that knew him thought that he was absolutely wonderful. He studied number theory and brought everything together that was there, and then within a year or so he left that completely and revolutionized the theory of integral equations. It's always change and always something new, and there's hardly anybody who is so flexible and so varied in his approach that Hilbert was.
His work is still talked about today, and his name has become attached to many mathematical terms. Mathematicians still use the Hilbert space, the Hilbert classification, the Hilbert inequality, and several Hilbert theorems. But it was his early work on equations that marked him out as a mathematician thinking in new ways. Hilbert showed that although there are infinitely many equations, there are ways to divide them up so that they are built out of just a finite set, like a set of building blocks. The most striking element of Hilbert's proof was that he couldn't actually construct this finite set. He just proved it must exist.
Somebody criticised this as theology and not mathematics, but really they'd missed the point. What Hilbert was doing here was creating a new style of mathematics, a more abstract approach to the subject. You could still prove something existed, even though you couldn't construct it explicitly.
It's like saying, I know there has to be a way to get from Göttingen to St. Petersburg, even though I can't tell you how to actually get there. As well as challenging mathematical orthodoxies, Hilbert was also happy to knock the formal hierarchies that existed in the university system in Germany at the time. Other professors were quite shocked to see Hilbert out bicycling and drinking with his students.
He liked very much parties.
Yeah?
Yes.
Party animal?
Yes.
Well, that's my kind of mathematician.
He loved very much dancing with young women. He liked very much to flirt.
Really? Most mathematicians I know are not the biggest of flirts.
Yet this lifestyle went hand in hand with an absolute commitment to maths.
Hilbert was, of course, somebody who thought that everybody who has a mathematical skill, a penguin, a woman, a man, or black, white, or yellow, it doesn't matter. He should do mathematics, and he should be admired.
The mathematics speaks for itself, yes, in a way. That it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter which
whether you're a penguin.
Yes, if you are a penguin, it's also.
If you can prove the Riemann hypothesis, we really don't mind whether you're a penguin.
Mathematics was for Hilbert the universal language.
Yeah, yeah.
Hilbert believed that this language was powerful enough to unlock all the truths of mathematics, a belief he expounded in a radio interview he gave on the future of maths on the 8th of September 1930.
Für uns gibt es kein Ignorabimus.
In it, he had no doubt that all his 23 problems would soon be solved and that mathematics would finally be put on unshakable logical foundations.
There are absolutely no unsolvable problems, he declared, a belief that's been held by mathematicians since the time of the ancient Greeks. He ended with his clarion call: we must know, we will know.
Wir müssen wissen, wir werden wissen.
Unfortunately for him, the very day before, in a scientific lecture that was not considered worthy of broadcast, another mathematician would shatter Hilbert's dream and put uncertainty at the heart of mathematics. The man responsible for destroying Hilbert's belief was an Austrian mathematician, Kurt Gödel. And it all started here, Vienna. Even his admirers, and there are a great many, admit that Kurt Gödel was a little odd.
As a child, he was bright, sickly, and very strange. He couldn't stop asking questions, so much so that his family called him Herr Warum, Mr. Why.
Gödel lived in Vienna in the 1920s and 1930s, between the fall of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and its annexation by the Nazis. It was a strange, chaotic and exciting time to be in the city. Gödel studied mathematics at Vienna University, but he spent most of his time in the cafes, the internet chat rooms of their time, where amongst games of backgammon and billiards, the real intellectual excitement was taking place. Particularly amongst a highly influential group of philosophers and scientists called the Vienna Circle. In their discussions, Kurt Gödel would come up with an idea that would revolutionise mathematics. He'd set himself a difficult mathematical test. He wanted to solve Hilbert's second problem and find a logical foundation for all mathematics. But what he came up with surprised even him. All his efforts in mathematical logic not only couldn't provide the guarantee Hilbert wanted, instead, he proved the opposite.
Got it. It's called the incompleteness theorem. Gödel proved that within any logical system for mathematics, there will be statements about numbers which are true, but which you cannot prove.
He starts with the statement, this statement cannot be proved. This is not a mathematical statement yet, but by using a clever code based on prime numbers, Gödel could change this statement into a pure statement of arithmetic. Now, such statements must either be true or false. Hold on to your logical hats as we explore the possibilities. If the statement is false, that means the statement could be proved, which means it would be true, and that's a contradiction. So that means the statement must be true. In other words, here is a mathematical statement that is true, but can't be proved.
Mars.
Gödel's proof led to a crisis in mathematics. What if the problem you're working on, the Goldbach conjecture, say, or the Riemann hypothesis, would turn out to be true but unprovable? It led to a crisis for Gödel too. In the autumn of 1934, he suffered the first of what became a series of breakdowns and spent time in a sanatorium. He was saved by the love of a good woman. Adele Nimbersky was a dancer in a local nightclub. She kept Gödel alive. One day, she and Gödel were walking down these very steps. Suddenly, he was attacked by Nazi thugs. Gödel himself wasn't Jewish, but many of his friends in the Vienna Circle were. Adele came to his rescue. But it was only a temporary reprieve for Gödel, and for maths. All across Austria and Germany, mathematics was about to die. In the new German Empire in the late 1930s, there weren't colourful balloons flying over the universities, but swastikas. The Nazis passed a law allowing the removal of any civil servant who wasn't Aryan. Academics were civil servants in Germany then and now. Mathematicians suffered more than most. 144 in Germany would lose their jobs. 14 were driven to suicide or died in concentration camps. But one brilliant mathematician stayed on. David Hilbert helped arrange for some of his brightest students to flee, and he spoke out for a while about the dismissal of his Jewish colleagues. But soon, he too became silent.
It's not clear why he didn't flee himself, or at least protest a little bit more. He did fall ill towards the end of his life, so maybe he just didn't have the energy. All around him, mathematicians and scientists were fleeing the Nazi regime, until it was only Hilbert left to witness the destruction of one of the greatest mathematical centres of all time.
David Hilbert died in 1943. Only 10 people attended the funeral of the most famous mathematician of his time. The dominance of Europe, the centre for world maths for 500 years, was over. It was time for the mathematical baton to be handed to the new world. Time, in fact, for this place. The Institute for Advanced Study had been set up in Princeton in 1930. The idea was to reproduce the collegiate atmosphere of the old European universities in rural New Jersey. But to do this, it needed to attract the very best, and it didn't need to look far. Many of the brightest European mathematicians were fleeing the Nazis for America. People like Hermann Weyl, whose research would have major significance for theoretical physics. And John von Neumann, who developed game theory and was one of the pioneers of computer science. the Institute quickly became the perfect place to create another Göttingen in the woods. One mathematician in particular made the place a home from home.
Every morning, Kurt Gödel, dressed in a white linen suit and wearing a fedora, would walk from his home along Mercer Street to the Institute. On his way, he would stop here, at number 112, to pick up his closest friend, another European exile, Albert Einstein.